Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we cut through the noise, taking all that information, flooding your feeds from deep space physics to global conflicts, even tricky U.S. politics, and really break it down.
That's right. Our mission today is synthesis, but, not just a quick summary. We're aiming for depth. We'll be looking at everything from discoveries challenging cosmic rules to economic shifts affecting millions. The idea is for you to really grasp the context, the why behind the headlines.
And we're kicking off with a pretty interesting pair, wouldn't you say? Two things we thought were kind of wild exceptions, maybe, but now seem to be fitting into a structure. We're talking dark matter. And believe it or not, the dogs managing to survive in the Chernobyl exclusion zone.
It is a fascinating contrast, isn't it? In both cases, finding unexpected order where we expected chaos, it's rewriting the playbooks scientifically and ecologically.
Definitely. And after we explore that structure, we're going to pivot hard into, well, human and political reality.
Which often feels less structured.
That's for sure. We've got the longest ever U.S. government shutdown 35 days and the huge corporate fight over a CEO's potential trillion-dollar pay package. That's got global investment funds really weighing in.
A lot to unpack there. High stakes all around.
Okay, let's dive in. We have a lot of ground to cover, starting out there where the rules themselves are still being discovered. Right. Let's start with the cosmos. And honestly, one of the biggest headaches in modern physics. Dark matter.
The ultimate mystery guest, yeah. Makes up about 85% of the universe's mass, but it's invisible. We've mostly defined it by what it doesn't do,
Exactly. But now there's this groundbreaking study suggesting something pretty huge. That dark matter actually does obey the laws of gravity, pretty much like ordinary matter does.
And that's the revolutionary part. It's not just that it's affected by gravity, we kind of assumed that. It's how similarly it behaves to the normal stuff, the baryonic matter we see.
Okay, so why is that specific finding such a big deal?
Because it deals a serious blow, maybe even a fatal one, to a major competing idea in physics.
Which is?
The idea that there might be a fifth fundamental force in the universe. See, if dark matter interacted differently with gravity than regular matter, that would have been strong evidence for needing something extra, this fifth force, to explain it.
Okay. So it would have pointed to a more complex, non-standard model.
Precisely. But since this new data suggests it behaves, well, normally responding to gravity just like the visible universe does, a key reason for needing that exotic fifth force kind of evaporates.
So theoretical physicists have to adjust their focus now.
Dramatically. It probably means refining the models we already have rather than, inventing entirely new forces. It grounds dark matter more in the physics we understand.
That is immense.
Yeah.
Really simplifies things in a way. And speaking of the Milky Way's hidden structure, does this new understanding maybe shed light on another old puzzle, that weird gamma ray glow from the galactic center?
It might, yeah. That's been an enigma for almost 20 years. This gamma ray excess astronomers couldn't quite figure out its source or shape.
I remember the leading theory was pulsars, right? Thousands of them.
That was the leading idea, yes. Unresolved pulsars, these fast-spinning neutron stars. But this new analysis suggests a potentially simpler answer. Maybe the glow is just a signature of how dark matter is distributed near the core, specifically that it's not spherical.
Not spherical, so like lumpy? How would that happen?
Think galactic collisions. Cosmic fender benders, basically. Our Milky Way has had its share over billions of years. These violent events could have gravitationally reshaped the dark matter halo around the core, pulling it into a less uniform non-spherical shape.
Okay.
And if the dark matter distribution is uneven like that, the way it interacts or decays could produce exactly the pattern of gamma ray excess we see. It connects the galaxy's violent past to a current cosmic mystery. Quite elegant, really.
That's fascinating, tying structure to history on a cosmic scale. Okay, let's bring it back down to Earth, sticking with this theme of unexpected structure. You mentioned the dogs of Chernobyl.
Right, and the Chernobyl exclusion zone in Ukraine, an environment you think of as just radiated chaos, basically, since the 1986 disaster.
Yeah, total breakdown.
But researchers have been studying the hundreds of stray dogs living there, descendants of Tets left behind.
And what did they find? Are they just surviving?
They're more than surviving. Genetic studies show they've developed a distinct, predictable genetic profile compared to other dog populations. Despite the high radiation, this isolated group has adapted in a structured way.
So evolution and fast forward almost, under intense pressure.
Exactly. It's a clear, predictable genetic pathway responding to chronic radiation. So much like dark matter is now seen obeying gravity's rules, these dogs are obeying the rules of rapid, isolated evolution. It shows order emerging even from what looks like total disorder. Life finds a way, structures itself.
A powerful example of systems finding equilibrium. Okay, from the invisible universe and resilient life, let's zoom into our own star, the sun. Another unexpected discovery there.
Yes, researchers found these twisting magnetic waves right on the sun's surface, which might sound technical, but it could solve a huge solar mystery.
You mean the coronal heating problem?
That's the one. It's been baffling scientists for ages. The sun's surface, the photosphere, is hot, obviously, but the outer atmosphere, the corona, is millions of degrees hotter.
Which seems totally backwards, right? Shouldn't it get cooler further away from the heat source? Basic physics?
Exactly. It defies simple thermodynamics. But these newly found twisting magnetic waves might be the answer. They could be acting like giant whips, channeling energy from inside the sun right through the surface and pumping it into the corona.
Transport mechanism.
Potentially, yes. The key heating mechanism that explains why the corona is so incredibly hot. Understanding this isn't just about solar physics, it's vital for predicting space weather solar flares, CMEs that can seriously impact us here on Earth, satellites, power grids, you name it.
Right. Space weather is becoming increasingly critical. Now, shifting gears to technology, but still kind of looking up. We often talk about artificial intelligence, AI, in terms of jobs or maybe ethics, but it's already out there working as a high-stakes mechanic in space.
Absolutely. For the James Webb Space Telescope, the JWST, operated by NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, an incredibly complex piece of kit millions of miles away.
And it had some issues early on, blurry vision.
It did. Initial data wasn't as sharp as hoped, and obviously you can't just send a repair crew out there.
So AI to the rescue. How does that even work? Fixing a blurry telescope remotely.
It's pretty amazing. They use advanced AI algorithms. The AI didn't just look at the pictures. It analyzed all the data, raw sensor readings, wavefront analysis, everything. It diagnosed the problem wasn't some catastrophic failure, but incredibly tiny misalignments in the optics. We're talking nanometers.
Wow.
Then, the AI calculated the precise adjustments needed for each mirror segment and mechanism, and it automated the recalibration process.
So it fine-tuned the focus.
Exactly, using computational power way beyond what humans could do in that time frame. It restored the telescope's high-resolution imaging. Without that AI intervention, JWST could have been a very expensive, blurry disappointment.
The ultimate long-distance repair call, handled by AI. Okay, let's wrap up this section with a major technological and, frankly, geopolitical development from China. A massive new cargo ship powered by nuclear energy.
That's the plan. A huge new container vessel, designed to carry something like 14,000 containers. And the power source is key. A thorium-based molten salt reactor, or TMSR.
Okay, TMSR, molten salt, sounds different. Why is that considered potentially safer than traditional nuclear reactors on ships?
Good question. Traditional reactors usually use solid uranium fuel rods and need high-pressure water for cooling. If that cooling fails, you risk a meltdown. A TMSR is fundamentally different.
How so?
It uses liquid fuel, a molten salt mixture that includes thorium. Crucially, it operates at normal atmospheric pressure, no high-pressure systems needed.
So less risk of breach.
Much less. And the safety feature is passive. If there's an emergency, the molten salt fuel just drains into holding tanks below where it cools down and solidifies naturally, stopping the nuclear reaction. No pumps, no emergency water needed. It's inherently safer by design.
Okay, that makes sense. And the reactor itself is huge, 200 megawatts. But it generates less electricity.
Right. The reactor produces 200 megawatts of heat. That heat is then used to generate about 50 megawatts of electricity using something called the Brayton cycle.
Brayton cycle, like a jet engine.
Sort of analogous, yeah. Think of it like a very efficient gas turbine. Instead of burning jet fuel, it uses super hot, high-pressure gas in this case, often supercritical carbon dioxide heated by the reactor. This expanding gas spins a turbine to generate electricity, potentially much more efficiently than traditional steam cycles used in older reactors.
And the bigger picture here, the strategic angle, involves the fuel itself, thorium.
Absolutely. China has enormous domestic reserves of thorium. Some estimates say enough to power the country for over 1,000 years. So this isn't just about one ship. It's a long-term energy play. It reduces reliance on foreign oil for shipping, which is a huge global polluter. It drastically cuts carbon emissions. And it positions China as a leader in what they see as the next generation of safer, more sustainable nuclear power. It's technology, energy security, and geopolitics all rolled into one massive project.
Okay, let's shift focus now to global security in conflict zones, where things remain incredibly tense, starting with Ukraine.
Yes, the fighting, particularly in the eastern Donetsk region, is still extremely fierce. Reports indicate intense combat ongoing around Pokrovsk, which is a really critical logistics hub.
And President Zelensky was recently near there.
He was. He made a high-profile visit to troops near Pokrovsk and another frontline town, Dobropilya. It was partly to assess the situation, partly morale boosting, as Ukrainian forces mount these fierce counterattacks against entrenched Russian positions.
And Russia's strategy continues to involve hitting infrastructure.
It does. Alongside the frontline battles, we're seeing continued Russian drone strikes targeting civilian energy facilities and also maritime infrastructure, particularly down in the southern Odessa region on the Black Sea.
Now, this intensity brings us to a really sensitive political issue, one that complicates Western support for Ukraine, the appearance of certain symbols among some Ukrainian units.
This has been a persistent point of friction, yes. During some of Zelensky's recent visits to the front lines, video footage emerged showing soldiers in certain units displaying controversial symbols, specifically symbols sometimes associated with neo-Nazism, like the Wolfsangel rune.
And the official Ukrainian position.
Officially, Kyiv denies that neo-Nazi ideology is widespread in its military. But the problem is, when these symbols keep appearing, especially during high-profile presidential tours, it directly fuels the narrative Russia uses to justify its invasion, the whole denazification claim.
How does that play out internationally for Western allies?
It creates a real headache, diplomatically and politically. Western governments are pouring billions into supporting Ukraine, framing it as defending democracy. When images surface showing symbols linked to, far-right extremism or historical collaborators, it becomes much harder for leaders in the U.S. or Europe to maintain unified public support for that aid.
It gives ammunition to critics back home.
Exactly. It fuels debate within those countries about who exactly they're supporting and the ethical lines of the conflict.
And domestically, within Ukraine itself, there seems to be growing unease about how mobilization is being handled. Forced conscription tactics.
There's definitely been public outcry. Reports of forced mobilization are causing significant concern. There was one very high-profile incident in Kyiv involving a physical education teacher.
What happened there?
Conscription officers reportedly apprehended him right in front of his students during a lesson, pulled him out of the school. Now, he was apparently later released because, as a teacher, he was technically eligible for deferment. But the optics were terrible. The event was filmed, shared widely, and it really fed into this public anxiety.
Is this seen as isolated or part of a pattern?
It seems to be part of a wider pattern, unfortunately. There's even grim slang for it, busification, referring to officers using vans to basically grab men off the streets. Official complaints about these tactics are reportedly in the thousands this year alone. It suggests the military is under immense pressure to find manpower due to heavy casualties and the ongoing intensity of the war.
The sign of desperation, perhaps. Meanwhile, the nuclear rhetoric seems to be dialing up again, and surprisingly, initiated by comments from the U.S.
That's right. President Trump recently stated an intention for the U.S. to resume nuclear weapons testing. He cited threats from Russia and China as the reason.
That's huge. Resuming testing would essentially tear up the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, the CTBT, wouldn't it?
It absolutely would. The CTBT framework has kept a global moratorium on live nuclear tests for decades. So, the statement caused immediate alarm bells globally. Russia, through Kremlin's spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, quickly demanded clarification, emphasizing that both Moscow and Beijing are sticking to the moratorium.
How did the U.S. administration respond to that pushback?
Well, the U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright stepped in to clarify. He stated that the preparations being discussed are for non-critical trials, meaning tests designed to check the safety and reliability of existing nuclear weapon components without actually causing a nuclear explosion. Things like subcritical experiments. So, while the initial rhetoric was alarming and sounded like a major policy shift, the clarification suggests it might be more about stockpile stewardship, framed perhaps in deliberately aggressive political language.
Okay, so maybe not live detonations, but still a ratcheting up of language. And Russia, of course, has its own nuclear messaging, particularly about this Burevestic missile.
Yes, Russia makes very bold claims about the Burevestnik. They say it's a nuclear-powered cruise missile with practically unlimited range, capable of evading any current or future defense systems.
Sounds formidable. But is it real?
Well, that's the big question. Many Western military analysts and experts are deeply skeptical. They've described it as unremarkable technologically and suggest it might be more of a propaganda tool.
A psychological weapon.
Possibly, designed to project Russian power and deter potential adversaries. Sources point to a very low success rate in its testing program since around 2019, which casts doubt on whether its operational capabilities actually match the hype.
Interesting. Okay, let's move west to Germany. There's a really significant shift happening in their military posture.
A truly historic shift, yes. Chancellor Friedrich Merz has explicitly vowed to make the Bundeswehr, that's the German armed forces, the strongest conventional army in Europe.
That's a major statement, especially given Germany's post-World War II history.
It absolutely is. It marks a profound break from decades of German reluctance to project major military power. The motivation is clearly the perceived long-term threat from Russia. And it's backed by serious money, a commitment of around $377 billion for modernization, new equipment, and building up forces.
This must be changing the strategic balance within NATO and Europe.
Fundamentally, it shifts more of the burden of conventional defense in Europe onto Germany's shoulders. But this push, even if seen as necessary by many, hasn't been without controversy inside Germany.
Particularly around the messaging.
Exactly. There was significant criticism over a promotional video the German military released for a new tank brigade being deployed to Lithuania as part of NATO's eastern flank reinforcement.
What was wrong with the video?
Critics, including the BSW political party, called it disturbing propaganda. The issue wasn't the deployment itself, but the video's style. It used things like torchlight visuals, very dramatic, dark cinematography, and music that some felt evoked uncomfortable historical periods.
So echoes of a more militaristic past.
That was the concern raised, that the aesthetic suggested a worrying return to a kind of overt, almost aggressive militarism in public messaging. It sparked a necessary national conversation about how Germany should communicate its renewed military strength, not just that it's doing it.
A sensitive line to walk. Finally, in this section, we have to address the ongoing, deepening crisis in the Israel-Palestinian conflict. The humanitarian situation in Gaza remains dire.
It's catastrophic. The reported death toll continues to climb steeply, now cited as over 68,872 dead and more than 170,677 wounded, largely due to Israeli airstrikes, including heavy bombardment of densely packed refugee camps.
And amidst this, there's a new measure being implemented by the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF, called the Yellow Line. What is that?
The Yellow Line appears to be both a physical and a symbolic division being imposed within Gaza. Physically, it seems to involve checkpoints and restrictions that severely limit movement between different areas of the Strip.
Making aid delivery even harder.
Extremely difficult, yes. And making it harder for displaced people to move safely. Metaphorically, it enforces a separation, carving Gaza into distinct zones. Critics argue this further fragments the territory and population, making any kind of unified governance or humanitarian solution much more complicated. It looks like an attempt to create semi-permanent divisions.
And the violence isn't limited to Gaza, right? The West Bank is also seeing a surge.
A dramatic surge. The Palestinian Authority released figures documenting some 2,350 attacks by the Israeli army and settlers in the occupied West Bank just in the last month.
Attacks on who or what?
Reports indicate these attacks heavily targeted Palestinian civilians, particularly olive pickers during the harvest season, and agricultural land. This is often seen by observers as a strategy to displace Palestinians, damage their livelihoods, and assert control over territory.
And settlement expansion continues alongside this.
Yes. Concurrent with this violence, Israel's Planning Council is reportedly advancing plans for almost 2,000 new housing units in existing settlements in the West Bank. This expansion, considered illegal under international law, further erodes the possibility of a viable Palestinian state and is a major obstacle to peace.
And there was also a grim development concerning the hostages taken by Hamas back on October 7th.
Yes, a very somber development. Hamas recently returned a coffin to the Red Cross. They claimed it contained the remains of Itay Chin, an Israeli-American soldier who was taken hostage. It's a stark reminder of the ongoing hostage crisis and the immense suffering on all sides of this conflict.
Okay, let's bring our focus back to the United States, where the political situation in Washington, D.C. reached a kind of paralysis point recently. a major government shutdown.
A record-breaking one, in fact. It hit 35 days, making it the longest federal government shutdown in U.S. history. This came after, I think, 14 different attempts in the Senate to pass a funding package failed.
35 days. What are the immediate impacts of something like that, beyond the obvious inconvenience for federal workers?
Well, hundreds of thousands of federal employees were either furloughed, sent home without pay, or forced to work without knowing when they'd get paid. But the economic ripple effects are huge, too. One major one was the halt in releasing critical economic data.
Why is that delay so damaging? Doesn't the data just come out later?
It does eventually, but the delay creates enormous uncertainty for businesses, investors, and even policymakers. Think about it, key data points, like maybe the real impact of President Trump's tariffs on trade or shifts in consumer confidence or sector-specific performance. None of that was available.
So everyone's flying blind.
Essentially, yes. Businesses can't make informed decisions about hiring or investment. Investors don't know where to put their money. International partners don't know how the U.S. economy is really doing. It injects a real paralysis into economic decision-making.
And the political fight behind the shutdown had direct consequences for some of the most vulnerable Americans,
Yep.
right? Particularly regarding food assistance.
That became a major flashpoint. It centered on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, what used to be called food stamps. It helps millions of low-income families afford groceries.
And President Trump threatened those payments.
He did. He suggested withholding SNAP payments until the shutdown ended, basically using it as leverage. This caused widespread panic and hardship among recipients.
Did the payments actually stop?
A court eventually ordered that the funding had to continue, but the political chaos and administrative hurdles still caused significant delays in getting the benefits out. And reports indicated that when the payments did arrive, recipients only received about half their regular monthly amount for that period. It really highlighted how political dysfunction can directly harm people relying on essential services.
A painful consequence.
Wow.
Now, shifting gears to recent election results, particularly from the 2025 cycle. These outcomes seem to signal a noticeable shift, maybe towards more progressive candidates.
There were definitely some significant results pointing in that direction. A key one was the New York City mayoral race.
Zohar Mamdani's victory.
Exactly. His win was historic on several levels. At 34, he became the youngest mayor in the city's history, and also the first Muslim mayor of South Asian heritage.
And he beat some big names, didn't he?
He did. He ran a very grassroots campaign, really mobilizing voters from the left, and defeated established figures, including former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who was attempting a comeback. It showed the power of progressive organizing outside traditional party structures.
What were the key planks of his platform? What defines his progressive agenda?
His campaign focused heavily on economic justice and social reform aimed squarely at working-class New Yorkers. Things like universal childcare, stronger tenant protections and housing rights, and significant reforms to the city's tax structure to ease the burden on lower and middle-income residents.
And this wasn't just a local story. These results, along with others, were seen nationally as, well, a message.
Widely interpreted that way, yes. Many saw these Democratic wins, especially in key gubernatorial races, as a significant rebuff for Trump, and the wing of the Republican Party aligned with him.
Which races specifically?
Virginia was a big one. Abigail Spanberger, who has a background as a former CIA officer and was a congresswoman, won the governorship. She became Virginia's first female Democratic governor, defeating the Republican candidate who had President Trump's endorsement.
How did she win?
Her campaign reportedly focused heavily on more moderate, practical issues, often called kitchen table issues, and tried to avoid getting pulled into the national culture wars. A similar story played out in New Jersey, where Democrat Mikey Sherrill won the governor's race.
And that matters because
New Jersey, especially certain suburban areas, has been a contested region. Sherrill's win there signaled a continuing trend of Democrats making gains in those affluent, educated suburban districts, which have been crucial in recent national elections and often seen as bellwethers.
Meanwhile, out on the West Coast, California took steps to kind of lock in its political leanings.
Through redistricting, yes, California voters approved new congressional district maps. These maps were explicitly designed, according to analyses, to bolster Democratic chances in 5 newly created congressional seats.
So, gerrymandering for Democrats.
Well, redistricting is the neutral term. Both parties engage in it aggressively, where they control the process. The goal here was clearly to maximize Democratic representation from California in the U.S. House of Representatives and solidify their power in Washington for the next decade, until the next census requires new maps again. It's a key part of the national political chess game.
Okay, let's take a brief detour outside the U.S. now to Europe, and a really alarming story about data privacy. We hear a lot about the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, being this really strict standard.
It's often called the gold standard globally for protecting personal data, yeah. Imposes tough rules on how companies collect and use information about people in the European Union.
But apparently it's not foolproof. There's been a major breach involving top EU officials.
This is pretty shocking. An investigation uncovered that highly sensitive phone location data belonging to senior European Union officials is actually being sold commercially, like on the open market by data brokers.
Wait, how is that even possible with GDPR in place? Where's the loophole?
That's the critical question. It seems the breakdown happens in a few ways. While GDPR is strict for companies within the EU and requires explicit consent, some data brokers operate from outside the EU's jurisdiction. Others might exploit loopholes around supposedly anonymized data.
But location data isn't really anonymous if you track it over time, right?
Exactly. It can often be de-anonymized quite easily, linking it back to individuals. So for you, the listener, this is really concerning. It shows a massive gap between the intent of consumer protection laws like GDPR and the reality of the global data market.
And the security risks are huge.
Immense. Think about foreign intelligence agencies potentially buying the detailed movement patterns of top EU diplomats or politicians. It's a major national security vulnerability, and it's prompting urgent calls to strengthen regulations and close these international loopholes that allow data brokers to operate in the shadows.
All right, let's transition now into health, history, and how humans adapt. Starting with something maybe surprisingly simple, but powerful for brain health. Just walking.
Yeah, this is really encouraging research, especially for cognitive health as we age. Scientists found that even modest daily physical activity, specifically walking as few as 3,000 to 5,000 steps a day, might significantly help delay the onset of Alzheimer's symptoms.
And this was particularly for people already at risk.
Yes, in older adults who had a genetic predisposition or other risk factors for Alzheimer's. It's a great reminder of that fundamental link between keeping the body moving and maintaining cognitive function long term. Simple, accessible, but potentially very impactful.
Definitely good news. We also have a couple of potential game changers in medical treatments.
Yeah.
First, for glaucoma.
Glaucoma is a major cause of irreversible blindness worldwide, second only to cataracts, I believe.
Sure.
Traditionally, treatment focuses on lowering pressure inside the eye, but this new research points towards potential biomarkers for earlier detection and maybe even treatment.
What are these biomarkers?
They identified two small molecules, one called agmatine, the other thiamine, which is vitamin B1. They found levels of these molecules were significantly lower in patients with glaucoma.
So low levels could signal the disease early.
That's the idea for detection. But even more exciting, preliminary studies suggest that actually administering these compounds, giving agmatine and thiamine supplements, might help protect the retinal cells from damage and actually slow down the progression of vision loss.
Wow, so moving beyond just managing pressure to actively protecting the eye cells.
Exactly. It's a potential shift towards a more neuroprotective strategy, which would be a huge leap forward if it pans out in larger trials.
Okay, and the second potential breakthrough is related to blood pressure, something surprising.
Yes, researchers reported discovering a surprising factor. They're words that can significantly decrease blood pressure over the long term.
Now, the source material we looked at didn't actually specify what that factor was. Why might that be?
That's not unusual in early scientific reporting. They might release the headline finding, "We found something that lowers blood pressure significantly," to stake their claim on the discovery and highlight its potential importance. But they might hold back the specific details, maybe while they file patents, or wait for full peer review of the detailed mechanism.
Ah, the process of science publishing.
Right. But the key takeaway for now is the impact. Potentially a new way to achieve a significant, lasting decrease in blood pressure. Given that hypertension is a massive global health problem, a leading cause of heart attacks, strokes, kidney failure, anything new that works could have enormous benefits.
Absolutely. Okay, but it's not all good news on the health front. Some concerning findings, too. First, about E. coli. We usually think of that as food poisoning.
Right, often linked to contaminated food or water. But this study was looking at person-to-person spread, and they found something pretty shocking. Certain dangerous strains of E. coli, the ones that can cause really severe illness like kidney failure, can actually spread between people almost as fast as viruses like the swine flu.
Really? That fast? How?
Primarily through the fecal-oral route, basically, poor hygiene allowing transmission. It's disturbing because it reframes E. coli not just as a food safety issue, but potentially as a pathogen capable of rapid community spread if hygiene breaks down. It really underscores the need for robust public health measures and vigilance against bacterial pathogens, too, not just viruses.
A sobering thought.
Yeah.
And sticking with hidden health hazards, cockroaches. Not just pests, but air polluters.
Apparently so, especially indoors. This research highlighted how cockroach infestations contribute significantly to poor indoor air quality.
How do they do that?
Through shedding body parts and, crucially, through their droppings. These contain allergens and other potentially toxic substances that become airborne dust. This can significantly worsen asthma and allergy symptoms, especially for children living in infested homes.
Is there a particular culprit among the roaches?
Interestingly, the study pointed a finger specifically at female cockroaches, suggesting they contribute most to this toxic load in an environment. The main point, though, is that effective pest control isn't just about cleanliness or aesthetics. It's a genuine public health intervention, particularly for respiratory health in vulnerable populations.
Right, connecting pest control directly to breathing, easier. Okay, one more cautionary note. This one about a very common supplement, melatonin.
Yes, this was a concerning study. It looked at long-term, regular use of melatonin, which millions use as a sleep aid. The study linked this long-term use to a significantly higher risk of developing heart failure.
How much higher?
The figure cited was potentially up to 90% higher risk in those long-term consistent users compared to non-users. Now, it's crucial to add the caveats. This shows a correlation, not necessarily direct causation yet. More research is definitely needed.
So people shouldn't panic and stop taking it immediately.
Experts always advise talking to your doctor before changing any medication or supplement routine. But this finding absolutely prompts a serious reevaluation of the long-term safety of melatonin, especially since it's often perceived as completely harmless because it's available over the counter. Long-term effects need careful study.
Definitely something to be aware of.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift from modern health concerns to ancient echoes. A discovery in Germany. A metal detectorist found something special.
A fantastic find, yeah. In Saxony in eastern Germany, an amateur metal detectorist unearthed a beautiful 2,200-year-old Celtic gold coin. It's a type known colloquially as a rainbow cup, supposedly because they were often found after heavy rains washed away soil, appearing near rainbows.
Cool name. But what's the historical significance? Was gold common there?
That's the key point. Saxony is generally considered outside the core territory of the Celtic tribes during that period, the pre-Roman Iron Age. Finding a high-value gold coin like this so far east near a place called Gundorf is quite unusual.
So it changes our map of where the Celts were active.
It suggests their influence, or at least their trade networks and economic interactions, extended much further than previously thought. A single coin can repaint the picture of ancient European connections, suggesting maybe more movement and exchange across tribal boundaries than the standard maps show.
Amazing what one small object can tell us. Finally, in this section, a connection between recent news and a piece of medical technology. The passing of former U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney.
Right. Dick Cheney passed away recently at the age of 84. But what's medically remarkable is how he lived for several years prior to his death, thanks to a left ventricular assist device, or LVAD.
That's a heart pump, essentially.
Exactly. It's a mechanical pump implanted to help a severely weakened heart circulate blood effectively. In Cheney's case, his heart was so damaged that the LVAD basically took over the main pumping function.
And this led to that unusual fact that he technically had no pulse.
That's correct. Because the LVAD provides continuous blood flow, not the rhythmic pulsing of a natural heartbeat, standard methods wouldn't detect a pulse. It's a fascinating side effect of the technology.
It really highlights how far medical technology has come, keeping someone alive under those circumstances.
It truly does. But, in today's world, it also raises another question. These sophisticated medical devices, like LVADs or even modern pacemakers, are increasingly complex and sometimes networked.
Which means they could be vulnerable.
That's the concern. The cybersecurity risks associated with life-sustaining medical devices are becoming a serious topic. Could these devices be hacked? Could they be remotely tampered with? It's a sobering thought alongside the celebration of the medical advancement itself.
All right, let's wrap things up today by looking at the world of business and finance, which seems to be in a particularly jittery state right now. A lot of talk about an AI bubble.
Definitely seeing that nervousness in the markets, yeah. Particularly in the US and Japan, there's been a noticeable downturn recently. And it's largely being driven by fears over what analysts are calling stretched valuations, especially in tech companies and anything related to artificial intelligence.
Meaning the stock prices got ahead of the actual profits?
That's the concern. That the excitement about AI's future potential has pushed stock prices up so high, so fast, that they don't reflect the current actual earnings or maybe even realistic near-term prospects. Bubble territory, potentially.
Was there anything specific that spooked the market recently?
Well, one factor mentioned in the reports we saw was warnings coming from a very high-profile trader, the guy who famously predicted the 2008 housing crisis, the one The Big Short movie was based on.
Michael Burry.
That's the one. Reports indicate he's now actively betting against a number of AI-related stocks. When someone with his track record makes a big public move like that, it tends to make other investors very nervous and can trigger sell-offs.
Right. His reputation carries weight. And this fragility, even for established companies in the digital age, was shown pretty starkly by what happened to a major UK retailer.
Marks & Spencer, M&S, a huge name on the British high street. They apparently had their profits almost completely wiped out recently due to a massive cyber attack.
Wiped out. How much did it cost them?
The estimated cost was staggering around $101 million. That covers everything from immediate recovery efforts, lost sales, potential fines, and the longer-term costs of rebuilding systems and customer trust. It's a brutal reminder that cyber risk isn't theoretical. It's a direct, potentially devastating threat to the bottom line, even for giant, established companies.
Absolutely terrifying for any business.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but perhaps the biggest corporate drama right now involves one individual, Elon Musk,
Mm-hmm.
and this proposed pay package at Tesla.
Oh, yeah, that's causing huge waves. The proposal is for a compensation package potentially worth up to, well, figures up to $1 trillion have been thrown around, depending on stock performance. It's astronomical.
And it's facing some serious opposition.
Very serious opposition. A key opponent is Norway's sovereign wealth fund, Norges Bank Investment Management. It's one of the largest investors in the world, managing Norway's oil wealth.
And why are they against it? Just the sheer size.
It's not just the amount, according to their statements. They called the package fundamentally unsustainable and argued it's misaligned with the long-term interest of shareholders. Their job is to preserve wealth for Norwegians for generations, and they see this level of executive pay as distorting incentives and not reflecting value created for all stakeholders, just one individual.
A principled stand from a major investor. But Tesla's board is pushing back hard.
They are. They're strongly urging shareholders to vote for the package. Their argument is basically that Musk is uniquely critical to Tesla's success. They've warned that failing to approve this compensation could lead to him focusing less on Tesla or key talent leaving with him. They're framing it as essential for the company's future innovation and growth.
So it's a high-stakes showdown between shareholder governance principles and the perceived value of a superstar CEO.
Exactly. The outcome of this vote could set precedents for executive compensation across the tech industry and beyond for years to come.
Okay, let's shift over to the UK again, this time looking at government fiscal policy. Chancellor Rachel Reeves seems to be signaling a possible break from past traditions.
Yes, in statements leading up to the budget, Chancellor Reeves has been emphasizing the need to make necessary choices. Significantly, she has pointedly refused to rule out tax increases.
Why is that considered such a big deal? Don't governments raise taxes sometimes?
They do, but in UK politics, there's been this kind of unwritten rule, almost a taboo, for decades, maybe 50 years, where neither major party really campaigns openly on major tax hikes. It's generally seen as politically toxic.
So breaking the taboo, what's forcing her hand, potentially?
The economic context is pretty tough. The UK is dealing with forecasts of declining productivity, which is crucial for long-term growth, and also grappling with very high levels of national debt accumulated over recent crises.
So they need more revenue.
That seems to be the implication. Reeves's careful language suggests the government might believe that some form of tax increases, perhaps targeted at wealth or corporations or higher earners, is becoming unavoidable to stabilize public finances and fund necessary investments. It's a politically risky path, but maybe one they feel is economically necessary.
A difficult balancing act.
Yeah.
Finally, let's look at this really interesting dynamic between e-commerce and digital media, where AI seems to be playing a double role.
It's a fascinating feedback loop, yeah. On one side, you have platforms like Shopify, which helps businesses set up online stores. They're seeing massive success because of AI integration.
How much success?
The numbers are pretty wild. Reports say AI-driven traffic to Shopify stores is up something like 700% just since the start of 2025. And actual orders driven by AI recommendations or personalization are up even more, maybe 11 times or 1100%.
Wow, so AI is making online shopping much more effective.
Clearly. It's boosting sales through better personalization, smarter search results within the stores, more targeted marketing, all powered by AI analyzing customer behavior at incredible speed.
Okay, so AI is a huge boon for e-commerce, but at the same time, it's causing major problems for digital media companies.
Exactly the opposite effect there in some ways. Take a company like People Inc., a large digital media publisher. They're reportedly now actively pursuing licensing deals with AI companies like Microsoft for its Copilot AI.
Why? To use AI themselves.
Not just to use it, but to get paid by Microsoft for using their content to train Copilot. They're doing this, reports suggest, to try and offset a steep decline in their traditional ad revenue.
And why is ad revenue declining? Because of AI.
Precisely. More and more users are getting information by asking generative AI assistants like Copilot or Google's Gemini instead of clicking through links from a Google search to the original publisher's website.
The AI summarizes the article, so you don't need to visit the site.
Exactly. And that cuts off the main way publishers made money online for years, display ads shown to people who visited their pages. So the very AI that's supercharging e-commerce is simultaneously undermining the business model that supported a lot of online journalism and content creation. It's a really complex, contradictory impact.
A fascinating and potentially disruptive shift. Okay, we've covered a huge amount of ground today, from dark matter finally playing by the rules to the sheer chaos of that record-long U.S. government shutdown.
Yeah, the contrasts are really striking, aren't they? We see these incredible leaps in science and tech understanding the universe better, AI fixing telescopes millions of miles off, developing safer nuclear reactors, new potential medical treatments.
Right, real progress.
But then simultaneously, you see these fundamental human systems just struggling or failing. The world's biggest economy paralyzed by political deadlock for 35 days. Europe's top-tier data privacy law apparently having massive holes poked in it by commercial data brokers.
It leads to a pretty pointed question, doesn't it? Which brings us to our final thought for you, our listeners, to mull over.
If human ingenuity, if technology can achieve these incredible feats, if we can analyze the gravity of invisible matter across the cosmos, if AI can perform nanoscale repairs on a telescope millions of miles away, if we can build devices like the LVAD that keep people alive without a pulse,
then why do our largest, most powerful human organizations, our governments, seem to struggle so much with seemingly more basic foundational problems? Why is preventing a 35-day shutdown so hard? Why can't we guarantee fundamental digital privacy? Why do things like problematic military symbols keep appearing and undermining diplomatic efforts?
where is the political equivalent, the organizational breakthrough, that matches the pace of innovation we see in science and technology? It really makes you wonder if the biggest challenges we face now are less about technical capability or resources and more about political will, social organization, or just basic human cooperation.
Something to definitely think about. We'll leave you with that until our next deep dive.
You're enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.